Welcome to this deep dive,
Okay.
where we're exploring a truly unique piece of Texas history.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Texas Chicken Ranch.
All right.
You might know it from ZZ Top's LaGrange or
Yeah.
the Dolly Parton movie.
Yeah.
But we're going beyond those pop culture references today.
Right.
We're using Jamie Blushkin's book,
Okay.
Inside the Texas Chicken Ranch, the definitive account of the best little whorehouse to get the real story.
What's so captivating about the Chicken Ranch is that it's not just some scandalous tale.
Right.
It really embodies this fascinating clash between old and new Texas,
Yeah.
reflecting the changing values and societal shifts of the state
Mm-hmm.
throughout the 20th century.
It's like a microcosm of Texas unfolding right before our eyes.
Yeah.
And we're going to uncover some surprising things,
Okay.
starting with how the Chicken Ranch got its name.
Okay.
You know that story about farmers paying with chickens during the Depression?
A complete myth.
Right.
The real story is far more intriguing.
Okay.
In the 1930s, the Madam Jessie Williams was facing a grand jury investigation.
Oh.
So she ingeniously disguised the brothel as a chicken farm to avoid scrutiny.
Wow.
It was a stroke of genius, really.
Talk about quick thinking under pressure.
Yeah.
But it also makes you realize that brothels weren't exactly a new phenomenon in Texas history.
Right.
What made the Chicken Ranch different?
It was a combination of factors.
Okay.
The longevity of the Chicken Ranch,
Uh-huh.
spanning decades, is certainly unique.
Yeah.
But it was also the management, the way it was run, that set it apart.
Okay.
Let's talk about the madams, shall we? We've got Jessie Williams, the first madam,
Right.
known for her strict rules
Oh.
and keeping everyone in line.
Yeah.
Then comes Edna Milton in the 1950s.
Okay.
She seems to usher in a whole new era at the Chicken Ranch.
So Edna's approach was quite revolutionary for the time.
Yeah.
She instituted time off for the women, improved their living conditions,
Right.
things you wouldn't typically associate with a brothel.
No.
She really seemed to understand the human side of this business.
And it wasn't just about rules and regulations.
Right.
I was fascinated by the family dynamic
Yeah.
that emerges under Edna's leadership.
Yeah.
Some women stayed at the Chicken Ranch for years,
Wow.
forming genuine bonds and finding a sense of community.
It's not what you'd expect, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It speaks to a deeper need for belonging and security, something that was often absent in the lives of these women before arriving at the Chicken Ranch.
Right.
Edna's focus on good food, for instance,
Yeah.
wasn't just about providing nourishment. It was about restoring their health and, in a way, their dignity.
It's a remarkable contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, we have this image of a brothel as a place of exploitation.
Right.
And on the other, we see these glimpses of genuine care and support.
It's a reminder that even within seemingly unconventional settings, human connection and compassion can find a way to flourish.
And then there's the whole political angle.
Yeah.
The Chicken Ranch seems to have been deeply entwined with Texas politics,
Absolutely.
sometimes in surprising ways.
Take the 1972 election, for example.
Okay.
Sheriff T.J. Flournoy enlists the women of the Chicken Ranch
Mhm.
to help with Bill Hobby's campaign for lieutenant governor.
Yeah,
They're stuffing envelopes, licking stamps,
really.
and wouldn't you know it?
Yeah.
Hobby wins.
It's almost hard to believe, but it really happened.
Right.
You have these women who were typically marginalized and operating on the fringes of society,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're playing a role in a major political campaign.
It speaks to the complex and often contradictory nature of Texas politics,
Yeah.
where traditional values and a certain tolerance for vice could sometimes coexist.
Right.
But then just a couple of decades later,
Mm-hmm.
that tolerance starts to wane.
Okay.
When Clayton Williams runs for governor in 1990,
Yeah.
his past visits to the Chicken Ranch as a student come to light.
Oh.
And suddenly what was once a winked-at part of Texas life becomes a major liability.
What changed?
Texas was changing.
Okay.
The state was rapidly modernizing and urbanizing.
Hmm.
The media landscape was evolving too,
Why?
with television playing an increasingly influential role in shaping public opinion.
Yeah.
The Chicken Ranch, once hidden in plain sight, was now exposed to a much brighter spotlight.
And that brings us to Marvin Zindler,
Yeah.
the Houston reporter who becomes the face of the Chicken Ranch's closure.
Right.
He's this larger-than-life character
Mm-hmm.
with his signature white wig and a real knack for uncovering scandal.
Zindler's TV exposés on the chicken ranch were nothing short of explosive.
Wow.
He went all in detailing the activities,
Right.
interviewing locals and even confronting law enforcement officials about turning a blind eye to the brothel's operations.
He wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers, was he?
No, he wasn't.
But it makes you wonder, why did he go after the chicken ranch with such fervor?
Yeah.
Was it purely a moral crusade?
That's where things get a little more complicated. Remember, Zindler was ticked off by a corrupt DPS officer who had a personal vendetta against the chicken ranch?
Really?
So while Zindler may have presented himself as a champion of morality, there were clearly other forces at play.
It sounds like a classic Texas tale.
Yeah.
A mix of moral outrage, personal vendettas, and a whole lot of power struggles happening behind the scenes.
Right.
But ultimately, Zindler's crusade was successful. The chicken ranch, after decades of operation, is shut down in 1973.
It's almost symbolic, isn't it?
Yeah.
This clash between the old Texas, represented by the chicken ranch and its long history, and the new Texas, embodied by Zindler, and the rising influence of media scrutiny.
Right.
The chicken ranch became a casualty of that clash.
Wow.
A victim of the changing times.
It's a fascinating story.
I
And we've
yeah.
only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot more to uncover.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's dive in.
We're back, and we're digging deeper into the closure of the chicken ranch. We were talking about Marvin Zindler's exposés and how they really brought the chicken ranch into the national spotlight.
Zindler's approach was very much in your face. He wasn't afraid to confront people on camera, whether it was the sheriff, local politicians, or even the women who worked at the ranch. It created this sense of urgency and drama that captivated viewers.
You mentioned the impact of television at the time.
Yeah.
Do you think a story like this would have the same impact today?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
The media landscape is so fragmented now.
Right.
With social media, 24-hour news cycles, and endless online content. It's difficult for any one story to dominate the conversation for very long.
But back then, Zindler's reports had a real, tangible effect on public opinion. It seems like they forced a reckoning of sorts for Texas.
Yeah.
Pushing people to confront this aspect of their culture that had been largely ignored or accepted.
And we can't overlook the social context of the early 1970s. The Vietnam War was deeply dividing the country. The civil rights movement was challenging traditional power structures, and the women's liberation movement was gaining momentum.
Yeah.
There was the sense that the old ways were being challenged on multiple fronts.
So the chicken ranch, in a way, becomes a symbol of everything that's seen as outdated and wrong.
Precisely. It represented a system that many saw as exploiting women.
Right.
And it stood in direct contrast to the changing values of the time. Zindler, intentionally or not, tapped into that sentiment and became a sort of folk hero for those who wanted to see the chicken ranch shut down.
We talked earlier about the corrupt DPS officer who fed Zindler information, knowing that. Do you think it changes our understanding of Zindler's motives?
It certainly adds a layer of complexity. Was Zindler a righteous crusader driven solely by a desire to expose wrongdoing, or was he, to some extent, manipulated by someone with a personal vendetta?
Right.
It's hard to know for sure.
It reminds us that even in seemingly straightforward stories, there are often hidden motives and agendas at play. And in this case, it seems like the chicken ranch became caught in the crossfire.
It became a convenient target, a focal point for a lot of different anxieties and frustrations that were brewing in Texas at the time.
And the fallout from Zindler's reports was pretty significant. Politicians who had previously turned a blind eye to the chicken ranch were now being pressured to take a stand.
Right.
Law enforcement officials were facing scrutiny for their lax enforcement of vice laws. The chicken ranch had become a real problem for those in power.
It became a public relations nightmare, and remember, this was long before the internet and social media.
Right.
So the impact of Zindler's TV reports was immediate, and far-reaching public opinion shifted quickly, and the pressure to shut down the chicken ranch became immense.
It's hard to imagine a local news story having that kind of power today.
It really speaks to how influential television was at the time. It was the dominant medium for news and information, and people trusted what they saw on their screens. Zindler's reports created a sense of moral panic, and the authorities felt compelled to respond.
So on August 1st, 1973, the chicken ranch closes its doors for good. What was the immediate reaction?
There was a sense of shock, certainly.
Yeah.
The chicken ranch had been a part of the LaGrange landscape for so long that it was hard for people to imagine the town without it.
What about the women who worked there? What happened to them?
Some went back to their hometowns, others tried to find work in other brothels, a few even tried to start their own businesses, but it was difficult to replicate the success of the Chicken Ranch. It was a unique place with its own set of rules and dynamics.
It's sad to think that a place that provided a sense of community and support for these women was ultimately shut down.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes it comes at a cost, and in this case, the cost was the loss of a place that, despite its unconventional nature, offered a degree of security and stability for those who work there.
And the closure of the Chicken Ranch really marks the end of an era, doesn't it?
It does.
It symbolizes the shift from a more tolerant rural Texas to a more modern urban society where such establishments were no longer acceptable.
That's a great way to put it. The Chicken Ranch became a casualty of progress, a relic of a bygone era that couldn't survive in the changing social and political landscape of Texas.
But even though the physical place is gone, the story of the Chicken Ranch continues to fascinate people, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's been immortalized in songs, plays, and movies. It's a story that continues to resonate because it taps into universal themes of hypocrisy and morality and the tension between tradition and change.
And in a way, it's a story that's still relevant today, isn't it?
I think so.
We're still grappling with many of the same issues. The role of media in shaping public opinion, the changing dynamics of power, and the ongoing struggle to reconcile our past with our present.
I think you're right. The Chicken Ranch may be gone, but its story continues to provoke questions and spark debate. And perhaps that's the most enduring legacy of this once infamous Texas institution.
We'll be back after a short break to discuss the lasting legacy of the Chicken Ranch and what it tells us about Texas and its place in the American story. Stay with us. We're back, and it's strange to think that a place like the Chicken Ranch, once so alive with activity, is now just a memory, a fading footprint in LaGrange. But its story certainly didn't fade away, did it?
Not at all. The Chicken Ranch captured the public imagination in a way few brothels ever have. I think part of it is that it became this symbol of a bygone era in Texas, a time when things were wilder, less regulated.
You have ZZ Top singing about it, a Broadway musical, a Dolly Parton movie. You can't get much more iconic than that. And I think it speaks to our enduring fascination with places and stories that exist outside of what's considered acceptable society.
Absolutely. There's a certain allure to the forbidden, to the idea of these women running their own world, even if it was within the confines of a brothel. Of course, we can't romanticize the realities of sex work, but the Chicken Ranch, at least in the popular imagination, became associated with a sense of freedom and independence that many people found appealing.
It's interesting, though, because the Chicken Ranch's legacy is complicated, right? It's this blend of nostalgia, scandal, and social commentary all rolled into one.
Right. You have some people who see it as a harmless relic of the past, a place where people went to have a good time and no one got hurt. And then you have others who view it as a symbol of exploitation, a place where women were objectified and marginalized.
And it's impossible to ignore the role the Chicken Ranch played in exposing the hypocrisy of Texas society. You have these powerful figures, politicians, law enforcement officials who turned a blind eye to the brothel for decades, and then suddenly it becomes this huge scandal.
It really highlights that tension between public morality and private behavior that we see throughout history. And the Chicken Ranch became this lightning rod for those larger societal debates about what's acceptable, what's tolerated, and what gets swept under the rug.
But beyond those broader themes, I think it's important to remember the human side of the Chicken Ranch. We talked earlier about the family dynamic that existed there, the sense of community among the women. What do you think drew them to that environment, and what did they find there that they might not have found elsewhere?
Well, many of the women who worked at the Chicken Ranch came from difficult backgrounds. They might have been runaways, or they might have experienced abuse or poverty. And at the Chicken Ranch, they found a sense of belonging, a support system that they might not have had before.
It sounds like Edna Milton in particular created a unique environment where women felt safe and valued, at least to some extent.
Edna was a shrewd businesswoman, but she also seemed to genuinely care about the women who worked for her. She understood that their well-being was essential to the success of the business. And the fact that some women stayed at the ranch for years, even decades, suggests that it wasn't simply a place of exploitation. It was a place where they could build relationships, make a living, and find a degree of stability in their lives.
It's a reminder that even within unconventional settings, people can find connection and meaning. And I think that's a valuable lesson to take away from this story, even if we might not agree with the nature of the business itself.
Absolutely. And ultimately, the story of the Chicken Ranch isn't just about a brothel. It's about the complexities of human nature, the evolution of societal values, and the power of narrative to shape our understanding of the past.
It's a story that continues to challenge our assumptions, provoke our curiosity, and remind us that history is rarely black and white. It's full of shades of gray, just like the story of the chicken ranch itself.
Well said. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway, to approach history with an open mind, a willingness to embrace the nuances, and a recognition that even in the most unexpected places, we can find stories that illuminate the human condition.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the history of the Texas Chicken Ranch. It's a story that's full of surprises, contradictions, and ultimately reminds us that the past is never truly past. It continues to shape our present and influence our future. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to check out our next deep dive, where we'll be exploring another fascinating chapter in history.